How one decision turned World War II into hell. World War II was already the deadliest conflict in human history, but one critical decision transformed it from a global war into an unprecedented catastrophe. That decision was Adolf Hitler's choice to invade the Soviet Union in June 1941, known as Operation Barbarossa. This single move reshaped the war's scale, brutality, and consequences, turning World War II into a living hell for soldiers and civilians alike. Background: Europe before the decision. By 1941, Nazi Germany had achieved stunning success. Poland had fallen in weeks, France collapsed in just 6 weeks. Much of Western Europe was under Nazi control. Britain stood alone, but undefeated Germany had also signed the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, 1939, agreeing not to attack the USSR. This pact allowed Hitler to focus on Western Europe without fear of a two-front war, the very mistake that had doomed Germany in World War I. Yet Hitler never intended the pact to last. The decision: Operation Barbarossa. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched the largest invasion in history. Over 3 million soldiers, 3,600 tanks, 2,700 aircraft, a front stretching 1,800 miles. Hitler believed the Soviet Union would collapse in months. Slavic peoples were inferior. Nazi racial ideology. Germany needed Soviet land for Lebensraum, living space. This was not just a military invasion, it was an ideological war of annihilation. Why this decision turned the war into hell one. The war became a two-front nightmare. By invading the USSR while still at war with Britain, Germany doomed itself to fighting on two massive fronts. West, Britain and later the United States. East, the Soviet Union. This overstretched German resources, manpower, and logistics beyond recovery. 2. Unprecedented brutality on the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front became the deadliest theater of war in history. 27 million Soviet deaths, military and civilian, mass executions of civilian starvation used as a weapon, entire villages erased Nazi orders explicitly called for, killing political officers, starving Soviet cities, ignoring international laws of war. This was total war stripped of humanity. 3. The Holocaust escalated into industrial murder operation. Barbarossa directly fueled the Holocaust. Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing squads, followed the army. Entire Jewish communities were massacred. This violence paved the way for death camps like Auschwitz. The invasion radicalized Nazi policy from persecution to systematic genocide. 4. The Soviet Union refused to collapse. Hitler underestimated Soviet manpower industrial capacity. The ability to relocate factories. East Russian winter and terrain. Key turning points. Battle of Moscow, 1941. German advance halted. Battle of Stalingrad, 1942–43. Entire German army destroyed. Battle of Kursk, 1943. Largest tank battle ever. Decisive Soviet victory. From this point on, Germany was permanently on the defensive. 5. The war became truly global. The invasion pushed the Soviet Union into an alliance with Britain, the United States, after 1941. This formed the Grand Alliance, combining Soviet manpower, American industry, British global reach. Germany could no longer win. Long-term consequences of the decision. Germany's eventual defeat became inevitable. Europe was devastated on an unimaginable scale. The Cold War emerged from Soviet dominance in Eastern Europe. Tens of millions were dead or displaced. The invasion didn't just lose Germany the war, it reshaped world history. Conclusion: Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union was the turning point that transformed World War II into hell on earth. It expanded the war's scale, intensified its cruelty, accelerated genocide, and ensured catastrophic losses on all sides. What began as a campaign for conquest became a struggle for survival, one that consumed nations, destroyed civilizations, and left scars that remain to this day. One decision, millions dead, a world forever changed. Endless war and total destruction. After the failure of Operation Barbarossa, World War II became a war of attrition, a grinding conflict where victory depended on who could endure the longest. Battles lasted months or years. Cities were reduced to rubble. Civilian populations became direct targets. Unlike earlier wars, there was no clear line between soldiers and civilians. Bombings, sieges, and forced labor made everyday life a constant struggle for survival. 2. Cities turned into graveyards. Some of the most horrifying destruction followed Hitler's decision. Stalingrad, over 2 million casualties, starvation, freezing, street-by-street fighting. Leningrad siege, 900 days, over 1 million civilians dead from hunger. Warsaw, almost completely destroyed. Entire cities became symbols of human suffering on an industrial scale. 3. Escalation to extreme weapons. The prolonged war led nations to justify any weapon necessary to end it. Firebombing of cities, Dresden, Tokyo, chemical weapons research. Finally, atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 1945. The invasion of the Soviet Union indirectly contributed to this escalation by ensuring the war would not end quickly. 4. Psychological and moral collapse. The Eastern Front brutalized everyone involved. Soldiers became desensitized to violence. War crimes were normalized. Morality was replaced by survival. Many veterans returned traumatized, carrying what is now recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. 5. The fall of Nazi Germany. By 1944-45, Soviet forces pushed west into Germany. Allied forces landed in Normandy. German cities were under constant bombardment. Berlin fell in May 1945, and Hitler committed suicide. His single decision in 1941 had sealed his fate years earlier. 6. A divided world is born. The consequences didn't end with Germany's defeat. Europe was split into East and West. The Iron Curtain divided the continent. The Cold War began. The Soviet Union emerged as a superpower, something Hitler had desperately tried to prevent. Why this decision matters today. This single decision teaches critical lessons. Ideology can blind leaders to reality. Underestimating an enemy can destroy empires. War decisions affect generations, not just armies. World War II became hell not only because of weapons or battles, but because of choices made by those in power. Final reflection Operation Barbarossa was not just a military error. It was a human catastrophe unleashed by arrogance, hatred, and miscalculation. History shows us that one decision, made at the highest level, can plunge the world into darkness. The danger of ideology over reality. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union was driven more by ideology than strategy. Racial hatred replaced military logic. Political obsession overruled expert advice. Intelligence reports were ignored. When leaders allow belief systems to dominate decision-making, reality eventually responds with devastating force. World War II proves that ideology can destroy even the strongest armies. 2. The cost of underestimating an enemy. Germany believed the Soviet army was weak, the population would not resist, the war would be won before winter. Instead, the USSR mobilized millions, moved factories beyond German reach, adapted and learned from early defeats. This mistake turned a planned short campaign into a 4-year nightmare. 3. How one decision multiplied human suffering. Because the war continued longer and grew larger, civilian deaths increased dramatically. Famines spread across occupied territories. Entire generations were lost. Had Germany not invaded the USSR, the war might have ended earlier, or taken a very different path. The decision multiplied suffering on a global scale. 4. Power shifts that still shape the world. The invasion directly led to the rise of the United States and Soviet Union as superpowers, the decline of European empires, a divided Germany and Europe. Modern global politics, alliances, and tensions trace their roots to this moment. 5. A warning for future generations. Operation Barbarossa stands as a warning. No nation is invincible. War plans rarely survive first contact with reality. Decisions made by a few can destroy millions. History does not repeat exactly, but it rhymes. Overall conclusion of the series. One decision turned World War II into hell because it expanded the war beyond control, removed moral limits, triggered genocide and mass destruction, guaranteed total defeat. Operation Barbarossa was not just a military failure, it was a turning point in human suffering. Soldiers caught in an endless nightmare. For ordinary soldiers, Hitler's decision meant unimaginable suffering, freezing winters without proper clothing, starvation and disease, constant fear, exhaustion, and death. German soldiers realized too late that they were fighting a war they could not win, while Soviet soldiers fought with the knowledge that defeat meant extermination. 2. Civilians as the main victims. The invasion of the Soviet Union turned civilians into primary targets. Villages were burned as punishment. Millions were forced into labor camps. Women, children, and the elderly were killed without mercy. The concept of safe areas disappeared. Survival became a daily battle. 3. Children of war children suffered the most. Orphaned at massive scale, forced to work or fight. Traumatized for life, many grew up knowing only hunger, violence, and loss. Their stolen childhoods remain one of the war's greatest tragedies. 4. The moral breakdown of humanity. The Eastern Front showed how quickly morality collapses in total war. Orders replaced conscience. Survival justified cruelty. Violence became routine. This moral collapse left deep scars on survivors and shaped post-war attitudes toward violence and authority. 5. Remembering the suffering memorials across Europe stand as reminders. Mass graves, ruined cities, silent monuments. They exist not to glorify war, but to warn humanity of the cost of reckless decisions. Key message of this part: how one man's choice overruled millions of lives. Operation Barbarossa shows how absolute power becomes dangerous. Decisions were made by a small group. No democratic checks existed. Dissent was silenced. When one leader's ambition outweighs human value, war stops being strategy and becomes mass destruction. 2. Could the hell have been avoided? Historians widely agree Germany was not prepared for a long Eastern War. Diplomacy could have delayed or avoided invasion. Military advisors warned against it. Yet arrogance and obsession won. This proves that wars are not always inevitable. They are chosen. 3. The pattern repeats in history. This decision reflects a larger historical pattern. Overconfidence after early success. Underestimation of enemies. Ideology replacing reason. From Napoleon in Russia to modern conflicts, history repeatedly shows that unchecked ambition leads to collapse. 4. Responsibility of future leaders. The lesson is not only historical, but moral. Leaders must be accountable. Military power must have limits. Human lives must matter more than victory. The suffering of World War II demands responsibility from future generations. 5. Why students must study. Understanding this decision teaches students critical thinking, not blind loyalty. The human cost behind political choices, why peace is fragile. History is not just dates and battles. It is choices and consequences. Final closing statement. World War II did not become hell by accident. It became hell because one decision crossed every boundary: moral, political, and human. Operation Barbarossa stands as one of the clearest reminders in history that the greatest danger to humanity is not weapons, but decisions made without humanity. A different path for World War II. If Hitler had not invaded the Soviet Union, Germany could have focused fully on Britain. Resources would not have been split. The Eastern Front's massive losses might have been avoided. Many historians believe the war would still have been brutal, but not as catastrophic as it became after 1941. 2. Why this what if matters. Counterfactual history helps us understand one truth. Wars are shaped by choices, not fate. Operation Barbarossa was not forced on Germany, it was chosen, and its consequences were avoidable. 3. Key reasons. This decision changed everything. Quick points. Opened a two-front war, caused the deadliest fighting in history, accelerated the Holocaust, strengthened the Allied powers, led directly to Germany's defeat, changed global politics forever. 4. One decision, one lesson. This decision teaches a timeless lesson. Military strength cannot defeat geography, climate, and human will. Hatred creates enemies faster than armies can defeat them. Victory without morality leads to ruin. Final one-line conclusion for exams. Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union turned World War II into hell by expanding its scale, intensifying its brutality, and ensuring unimaginable human suffering. From World War to Cold War, Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union did not just affect World War II, it redesigned the global power structure. Because of the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union emerged as a military superpower. Red Army forces occupied Eastern Europe. Communist governments were installed in Poland, East Germany, Hungary, and others. This directly led to the Cold War, 1947 to 1991, a divided Europe Iron Curtain, decades of political tension, proxy wars, and nuclear fear. Thus, one decision in 1941 shaped nearly half a century of global conflict. 2. The nuclear age begins. The prolonged war caused by Operation Barbarossa forced the Allies to seek a decisive end. Fear that Germany might develop nuclear weapons? Massive investment in the Manhattan Project, atomic bombs used in 1945? This invasion indirectly pushed the world into the nuclear age, permanent fear of mass destruction, arms races, and nuclear deterrence. Modern global security policies still exist because the war did not end early. 3. Collapse of European empires. Europe paid the highest price for Hitler's decision. Economies destroyed, populations exhausted, military power weakened. As a result, Britain and France lost global dominance. Colonies in Asia and Africa demanded independence. Decolonization accelerated after 1945. Countries like India, Indonesia, and many African nations gained independence partly because Europe could no longer maintain control after World War II's devastation. 4. Redefinition of warfare. The Eastern Front changed how wars are fought. Total war became the norm. Civilians became strategic targets. Logistics and industry became as important as soldiers. Modern military doctrines now emphasize supply chains, economic warfare, psychological warfare. These lessons were written in blood during the invasion of the Soviet Union. 5. Moral reckoning of humanity. After witnessing genocide and mass death, humanity faced a moral crisis. Can progress exist without ethics? Can obedience excuse evil? Can power exist without responsibility? These questions led to human rights movements, international humanitarian law, genocide prevention frameworks. The decision that turned World War II into hell forced humanity to redefine right and wrong. 6. The decision as a case study in leadership failure operation. Barbarossa is now studied worldwide as an example of strategic arrogance, ideological blindness, leadership without accountability. Military academies analyze it to teach why unchecked authority is dangerous, why listening to advisors matters, why long-term consequences outweigh short-term victories. Core insight of Part 8. One military decision did not just destroy armies, it reshaped politics, borders, ideologies, and global systems that still govern the world today. Power statement for projects and exams. The invasion of the Soviet Union transformed World War II from a conflict between nations into a defining catastrophe for humanity, whose consequences shaped the modern world. 1. June 1941. Confidence before the fall. When Operation Barbarossa began, Germany believed victory would come in 8 to 10 weeks. Early advances were rapid. Hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers were captured. At this stage, Hitler believed the decision was correct. This false confidence delayed any chance of retreat or reconsideration. 2. Autumn 1941. Reality begins to break the illusion. As German forces pushed deeper, supply lines stretched dangerously, fuel and food shortages increased, Soviet resistance grew stronger. The decision now revealed its first consequences. Germany could advance, but could not sustain itself. 3. Winter 1941 to 42. Nature turns into an enemy. Germany was unprepared for winter. Temperatures dropped below minus 30 degrees Celsius. Weapons froze. Soldiers lacked winter clothing. The Soviet counteroffensive near Moscow marked the first major German failure. The idea of a quick war died here. 4. 1942. Desperation replaces strategy. Instead of retreating, Hitler doubled down. Diverted forces toward oil fields in the south, ignored generals' warnings, split armies across vast distances. This led directly to the disaster at Stalingrad. 5. 1942 to 43. Stalingrad, the point of no return. At Stalingrad, over 300,000 Axis troops were encircled. Hitler forbade retreat. An entire army surrendered. This was the moment when the decision turned into irreversible catastrophe. 6. 1943. Germany loses the initiative forever after Stalingrad. Germany could no longer launch large offensives. Soviet production outmatched German industry. The Battle of Kursk ended Germany's last major attack. From this point on, Germany was fighting only to delay defeat. 7. 1944 to 45. Consequences become final. The results of the 1941 decision were now unavoidable. Soviets advanced into Eastern Europe. Allies landed in Normandy. Germany faced invasion from both sides. Berlin fell in May 1945, exactly what Hitler claimed Barbarossa would prevent. Why this timeline matters. This timeline proves one truth. The decision did not fail instantly. It failed gradually, and that delay multiplied suffering. Each month the war continued. Millions more died. Cities vanished. Trauma deepened. Examiner-friendly summary. The invasion began with confidence. Reality exposed its flaws. Refusal to retreat worsened damage. The war became longer, bloodier, and unavoidable. Strategic failure at the highest level. From a military perspective, Operation Barbarossa violated every major principle of warfare. Overextension. Germany invaded a territory too vast to control. Logistics failure. Supply lines collapsed over distance two-front war. A mistake Germany already knew was fatal. This decision ignored lessons from both history and intelligence, making defeat increasingly certain. 2. Leadership without accountability. One of the most dangerous aspects of this decision was how it was made. Hitler overruled professional generals. Dissent was punished. Decisions were based on personal belief, not facts. This created a system where mistakes could not be corrected, turning errors into disasters. 3. Ideology turned war into extermination. Unlike conventional wars, this invasion aimed at racial destruction, political cleansing, cultural annihilation. Because of this, civilians were deliberately targeted. Genocide became policy, moral boundaries disappeared. This is why the Eastern Front is remembered as the darkest chapter of the war. 4. Human cost beyond numbers. Statistics cannot fully describe the suffering. Families destroyed forever. Cultures erased, psychological scars carried for generations. The decision transformed war into a human tragedy on an industrial scale. 5. Could any other decision have been worse? Historians often argue that even Germany's defeat was not inevitable before 1941. Barbarossa removed all chances of negotiated peace. It unified Germany's enemies into an unstoppable alliance. Few decisions in history had such immediate and long-lasting negative consequences.